We are live from the Mercedes Textiles booth. Guys, thanks for tuning in. 3 o'clock, we're going live with Lieutenant Ray McCormack.
Yes.
I apologize, we just talked about that. My God. Rob, here we are, man.
Yes, we are.
You know, this is one of those times. I mean, we've gotten to know you over the last few years, and I consider you a friend and a comrade, and somebody that I enjoy talking to, and more so listening from. And I'm excited today. We haven't had the chance to really sit down and BS.
No, we haven't done an official broadcast
Yeah,
together.
but I think that this is a great opportunity. I mean, you know, the place is busy. It's a great show so far. And to get you here today in the Mercedes Textiles booth with us, just to talk shop and maybe to learn some new things about you that maybe hasn't been shared before, or some things about your career. But I will say that I would think everybody tuning in and hear people at the show, they know who you are. You're a name in the fire service, an influential and innovative name in the American Fire Service. And for that, we're grateful. And
Well,
I think
appreciate that.
I think you have a great message to share. You've been teaching now. We were just talking about that for over 20 years.
Yep.
A little history about you. 38 years on the job in the FDNY. Retired out of the Harlem Hilton, ladder 28.
That's right.
Yep. #1 in customer and firefighter satisfaction.
That's right.
That is one of my most favorite lines. For everybody tuning in and the people standing around, if you haven't seen Ray's keynote at 2009 FDIC, it is one of the more emotional and straight and matter-of-fact conversations or keynotes you will hear in regards to the state of affairs of the American Fire Service.
Yeah, and some of that is still going on.
Talk to me. I mean, I know, listen,
Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's
what,
13 years ago already.
Yeah,
if you think about that.
Yeah, it was 2009. Sure.
It was very, I don't know if you're a big public, I know you teach a lot.
Right.
So public speaking is very comfortable for you now.
That's correct.
But that keynote was powerful. And I've watched it a few times now, and I'd like to think a lot of other people have too, looking at the views and so on.
Right.
But it was moving. It was in your face. It was matter of fact, and that's who you are, though.
Right, right.
Authenticity. Talk to me about designing and developing. Was that easy to write?
Some people thought I wrote it on the way there, but yeah, one guy wrote, "What did he write that on a train on the way there?"
I don't know. I would think.
Obviously, not a supporter. Obviously,
Right.
No, I wrote it and wrote it in stages, obviously, and then I had the whole idea of the music coming on and everything, and that was different. They had never done that before. But the lady who does the sound here was very nice, and I told her, I said, "Hey, I want to get this song "Jump Around" to play," and she's like, "Yeah." So I said, "I want it really loud too," and then I said, "This is what I want you to do. You have a record scratch?" She goes, "Yeah, we have record scratch, no problem." So she puts a record scratch on there, and then if you watch close enough, you'll see I stopped jumping around, and I salute Halton, like, all right, enough of that. Enough of that. Yeah. So, it was fun to put together, and you're right. John Norman's wife, I ran into after John had presented, or I believe got an award,
right.
And so we were talking amongst ourselves, and she said, "I loved your speech." She said, "I laughed, I cried, it touched me." I was like, "Yeah, that's what a good speech is supposed to do."
100%.
So and get people thinking or whatever.
And you've been coming now to FDIC for many, many years.
Yeah, I started coming here in 2000. I was invited here to be part of a hot team, and we did live fire, live burn, and I did that for a few years, and then eventually I presented a classroom here, and it wasn't that great, but I finished very early, so they could go to another class.
The guys in the back row,
they could take in 2 classes in the same time period. But so that worked out. But then I've been involved in 6 hot classes here, 3 of which I created on my own, and got to meet a lot of marvelous people here. I see them every year.
Yeah.
Instructors that I've known for 20 years.
Sure.
Yeah, it's really great. So.
Sure. The camaraderie of this event, right? I mean, I'm sure that you do enjoy. I mean, you travel a lot, doing a lot of conferences.
True.
And a lot in the same circles. I mean, you have
that's right.
I don't want to say a guarded group, but a group of guys that have been doing this for a long time.
True.
That have the street credibility, the training credibility, and the ability to pass forth an incredible message in training. Was training always super important to you? Like coming up through the job, like from a probie point of view, up through your career as a fireman, senior fireman to a lieutenant.
Right.
How important was training to you?
Well, obviously, when you're a firefighter, you're dependent on other people to train you.
Sure.
So, where I worked, I worked in Ladder 24 as a firefighter in Midtown Manhattan, and that was a place where you really needed to be mentored because the buildings were very different than most people experience, and we had quite a variety of situations that you might run into.
Yeah.
So the firefighters helped each other. They made sure that you were going to be just as good when you had this position
Right.
as they had it, and our bosses were into it as well. So
there was almost like they were protecting the legacy of
Right,
the company and
100%.
making sure, because they knew that they had an expiration date and you were going to be
Yeah.
in that position teaching on. I think that's pretty.
yeah, in fact, I was the first probie. We had a firefighter killed in Macy's department store from the company, and 2 years later I got hired, and I was the first probie since then.
Oh, wow.
So, there was probably a little bit more of a protective cocoon thrown over
Sure.
me, or a special interest, you might call it. So, I felt when I left there, I got promoted out of there 13 years, and then you toss your hat in the ring, see where you're going to go. So I ended up going up to Harlem, and that's where I ended up staying. But I always felt, and not braggart, but I always felt that I could work pretty much anywhere
Yeah.
because of my experience down there.
Yeah.
It was just tremendous individual responsibility for decisions, which all ties into being a company officer. You have to make decisions. So I felt very prepared for that. Now, obviously, I wasn't in that role,
Right.
but it certainly, I believe, helped a lot.
Yeah, and it should be said too, right? A lot of people think they know the New York City Fire Department, but
Yeah.
New York City is so unique in its neighborhoods alone that it's completely different response areas.
Very diverse.
Yeah.
And Midtown, we had it as well. We had high-rise office buildings. We had older commercial buildings,
Right.
subways. I went to a cruise ship fire once. We had elevators, all kinds of elevator. The funny thing about elevators, right, is that back in those days, there weren't no cell phones.
Right.
We got people out of elevators that would be there all day.
Oh my gosh.
You'd get
Right?
stuck in some building and no
Right.
one come in.
Right.
So there was no phone call made. And I remember one woman, we got her out, basically just got the door. She lost it. She just fainted as soon as she got out because she was just so relieved.
That's wild.
Or
Yeah.
one New Year's Eve, where there's like 12 people stuck in this elevator, so we're going to get them out. There's a party upstairs they're supposed to go to. So we end up forcing this door. We get to the elevator. We open it. I think they might have climbed out the hatch. I forget. But, we rang in the new year with them. Let's put it that way.
We'll be available shortly.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean,
Yeah.
the storytelling and the experiences, right? Working in Midtown like that, and then heading up. What wanted to make the change after 13 years to head uptown?
Well, no matter how great your firehouse is, and there are plenty of them in New York.
Well, isn't
plenty.
every firehouse you work in is the greatest firehouse, right?
I believe so.
Yes.
Yeah, you definitely have to have that attitude.
Right.
So, but it's like anything else. You just want a little bit more diversity, and I was seeking that out through
Yeah.
promotion. So,
Yeah.
that
Outstanding.
challenge. Because, like we talked about before the show, I had access to a lot of people that were quite influential in the FDNY and, mentoring me, whether it was directly or through osmosis.
Yeah.
They all have everybody you meet, you can leave something for you, if you have a decent interaction,
That's right.
So.
Absolutely.
Ray, did you ever have you have all these mentors through your career early on? Do you recall any of those corrections, when you made mistakes and how that interaction went?
Yeah, I do.
That you can talk about,
Some people were very direct in those days, and so you knew where they were coming from. They didn't beat around the bush, which in the end is fine. They would discipline you with love, I suppose, or torture you with love, but they were always looking out for you. They might break your chops, but 20 minutes later, they're showing you something that you should know.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of, in all fire departments, there's a lot of tricks that you have to learn and ways to operate, not just the tools, but, like certain buildings you go to, you learn what you need to do in this building. So being able to work in an area for a decent amount of time gives you an advantage,
Yeah.
a tactical advantage,
Yeah.
because you know the buildings and you know what the game plan is. I often say especially when I talk about leadership, is, you get good bosses, you get bad bosses, and you get lucky bosses. To me, the lucky boss is supported by a talented group of firefighters, so that, when they are there, especially, we had it all the time. We had officers that came to Midtown Manhattan,
Right.
and they were like, duck out of water. They're
Yeah,
like,
the
I've
eyes
never
of this
worked
big,
in
yeah.
buildings this tall before.
Right.
So they would lean on the firefighters and say, listen, you got to help me out here. This fireman service elevator thing, I've never done it. I've read about
Sure.
it. To them, it's just theoretical, but when it becomes part of your actual SOP. So the smart ones did that. So to me, that's the lucky boss who inherits the good crew.
Right.
But the good crew, hopefully, was built by good officers.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So up in Harlem, you start in a ladder company, right? So you
Yes,
started in a
correct.
ladder,
Yes.
went to an engine,
Yep.
rescue for a little bit.
No.
No.
Then went back to the truck.
Then went back to the truck, and you finished.
I needed a rest.
I needed a rest. So here's my question, right? I mean, you are known in the American Fire Service as the engine guy,
Right.
moving water. You spent a lot of time in your career on ladders.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a
What
2.5
no, but
pound water
where I'm
can.
going with that is it brought you back to your engine days,
Yeah.
right?
Well-
your training and what you talk about.
I was a typical New York truck snob. I believe fires could be put out with 6-foot hooks at one time. And so after I got promoted, you bounce, obviously. You bounce
Right.
to different houses and stuff. And so Patty Brown, who was killed on 9/11,
Yeah.
was a fireman in Rescue 1. And Rescue 1 was near our quarters. So
Okay.
I would see him, got to know him a little bit there. And then he was a captain at this point. He was the captain of 69 Engine.
Got it.
And he asked me, would you like to work here? And I was like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, I want to work
Yeah.
here. First run I had was a fire there. I'm like, sign
Yep,
me up.
I'm home.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I stayed in the same house for over 25 years, basically, and, watched a lot of young guys come up. It was great. Absolutely great.
And in 69's territory, what is the neighborhood? What's your first due?
Well, the neighborhood there is a lot of 5- and 6-story tenements.
Walk up?
Yep.
Okay.
So tenements are, there's two different styles. We'll just say one's narrow, the other's wide.
Sure.
And they're about the same depth, 70 to 100 usually. And that's kind of like a tenement. So you might have, in a 5-story, you might have 20 apartments, thereabouts. So several apartments per floor, multiple floors, obviously no elevator.
Sure.
So a lot of that, brownstones as well, which is a little smaller of a house, more something like you might see in Philly, like a row house,
Sure.
but a little different. And then we did have a couple of private dwellings, but that's kind of rare. And of course, commercial,
Sure.
things like that. But we had a lot of vacant and partially vacant buildings when I got there as well. And so, but here's the thing: the buildings are diverse. That's good, but it's not. We don't have everything there.
Right.
But what we did have was the ability to do about 10 different hose stretches.
Well, that's where I was
on a
taking this, yeah.
moment's notice.
Right.
On a moment's notice.
Right.
You might have to do a rope stretch, a well hose stretch, a wraparound stretch, standpipe stretch. There's like 10 stretches, and these firefighters have to know all of them.
Right.
The ins and outs, the tricks. And like I said, we go to this place, oh, we got a wraparound staircase here. All right, we know how to do that. So that is the diversity.
Yeah.
That's the diversity
Yeah.
right there, knowing all those different stretches.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was leading that, right? It
Yeah.
was like, in a first due like that to be able, that's honing your craft. You have an engine company
Exactly.
that's got to be very well oiled to get that line. And not only that, but in the FDNY, you guys are all dead loop,
Yes,
right?
correct.
So, which is mostly uncommon everywhere else in the United States.
Yeah,
Can
that's
you
true.
touch on because I think a lot of the people that are out there see the FDNY, but kind of touch on what in general is on the back step, because we say a dead load and they just think there's hose, but there's a science to what is actually on that back step.
Right. So most New York City pumpers have 500-gallon booster tank, and they have 4 beds in the back. And one is typically used for 3.5-inch supply line. That's our standard size for supply line. We have one 5-inch hose, 35 foot typically, and that's in the front tray. And then most places will have a separate 2.5-inch bed, just completely 2.5, maybe 10, 12 lengths thereabouts. And then the 2 other beds, your primary and your secondary sort of, are 1 3/4 inch, maximum 6 pieces. So 300 feet of 1 3/4 inch, and then filled out by 2.5.
Got it.
So that'd be a combination of 2.5 and 1 3/4 inch hose. So before I got out, I did a job-wide survey, about a 5-page survey, where we asked every engine on the job, what does your hose bed look like? Like, what do you have on there? So, they might have 10 lengths of 3.5. So sent them the form, they filled it all out, and then we asked other questions about certain tools that they might have, and then they have side trays on the side of the engine. What's in that? Sometimes it's just hydrant cap or something like that, or a couple of pieces of hose, couple of lengths of hose, or whatever it might be, 3.5. So I was able to get a snapshot of the FDNY, and they all turned it in, so we had it. Some people didn't know the difference between a Breslin distributor and a floor below nozzle, but oh well. And we included pictures.
That's great.
Yeah, but we did get them all back.
Yeah.
They weren't all correct, but we got them back. Yeah.
That's good. Well, I think the other unique thing too, right, is that I don't know if it's informal or formal, but each company's allowed to have their own identity, and they find their ways of putting their plan together, their apparatus together, their hose set. There's little tweaks, right?
There is. We didn't think we would see much diversity, and you didn't.
Okay.
Because they all kind of followed a similar formula.
Right.
That's what the beauty of the FDNY is, that the game plan is citywide. Everybody knows what it is, and the rigs are very similar layouts, so you can work somewhere.
Right.
You can fit in pretty easily.
Yeah.
You don't know everything, but you can fit in pretty well, enough to function at a decent level. So like you're talking about the diversity, so there were only 2 engines that had less than 6 lengths on their primary. And they were both in my division, and I knew of both of them.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, so one of them is in the Bronx, and so we go to a 5th alarm there, and I said, this is that company's line. And the guy says, how do you know? I says, because they only have 3 lengths of 1 3/4 inch, and this 2.5 is way up the stairs, more than the other one. So that's their line, and sure enough, it was. But
that's funny.
Yeah. So
I always found it interesting too. Like, I saw a couple pictures, some of the calves, the engine companies, and there's a spare nozzle up there.
Yes.
With a 2.5 and an 1 3/4 inch.
That's correct.
For the second due company.
Tradition says that the nozzle firefighter of a company, if they go to a multiple or something like that, if they don't stretch their own line, takes their nozzle, spins off the other one, and uses your own tool, because technically you've checked it out and it'll function. So that's another pride thing displayed in a very traditional way.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of FDNY talk about engine company culture and so on, ladders too, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a lot more to it, right? The FDNY is such a big job. So much of the knowledge and experience that gets to be handed down within the American Fire Service stems from the FDNY. A lot of influential people that come out of that institution, right? Mm-hmm. You talked about, involved with the roof rescue with Kevin Shea.
Oh, yeah.
Right? There's one name that people recognize, Kevin Shea, right? Sure. And you were instrumental in that rescue, that very high-profile rescue. Patty Brown, right?
Correct.
Vincent Dunn was the deputy chief in your firehouse.
Yes.
Like, these are, and Joe Angelini, which, if anybody tuning in doesn't know who Joe Angelini is, please look him up and learn him and his story and so on. I mean, he is the senior man, right?
Yes, he was. He was the senior firefighter on FDNY on 9/11, and he was killed on 9/11. His son was also killed on 9/11. No, he was an amazing man, tough as nails, and loved to go to a good job, and and he was one of these people like an extra calorie burner, if you will. Like, you know, if there was more work to be done, he'd be doing it, you know. And, you know, this guy could outpace all the young kids, you know, and he was just tough. He was just tough, one of these tough guys. And there was a picture of Rescue One in an old WNYF magazine, and they had a fire at the Hotel Pennsylvania, I think it was called at the time, or the Statler, I forget. But anyway, it was right up the block from where 1 and 24 is located. And there's a picture of all the 5 guys from the rescue. And, you know, some of them are smiling, some of them are like dragging ass, you know, and here's Joey.
yeah. I know, that's like an iconic photo.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But where I was headed with that is like you were influenced by a lot of these people.
That's correct,
right?
yeah.
A lot of people in the American Fire Service don't have those strong influences that they can grab onto and you know, flourish with that, you know, because when you have strong firefighters and strong leaders, they promote their people, right? You got to empower your people.
Yeah, I mean, I could go through any one of those. You know, like Vincent Dunn. Right. So Vincent Dunn's deputy in my house, the 3rd Division, which covers Midtown Manhattan, is located in the firehouse. So he came from the Bronx, actually, and so he came with his own. I think he had his own driver. He brought his own driver with him, and so he would come down the kitchen all the time and say, "Hey guys, I'm working on this article, and you know, what do you guys think about this? Does it sound plausible or whatever?" So he would include, you know, on occasion, the firefighters and their feedback before he went ahead with something, and that's very nice.
Yeah,
that's a nice gesture to put your stuff out there and ask the rank and file, what do you think?
Right.
But you know, it shows him being smart enough to get that
right
and have it right before you put it out there. You know, you take that extra step, and this was one of the things he would do. And, you know, he had written a book already, and maybe he had written 2 books already, but he had written, so he was a published author, and his book on collapse of burning buildings, I mean, has definitely saved lives.
Absolutely.
No 2 ways about that. And he was just a nice, personable chief.
Yeah.
And Kurt just had something on his thing, and I said, he was the best deputy I ever worked for.
Yeah.
Bar none. He was.
Yeah.
And very smart. Very smart. I mean, you know, there's certain people, they know how to look at things, and I think that's what kind of separates, like, great instructors, some good instructors in a way, or, you know, some of the people that are thinking about different things in the fire service. I always hear guys say, oh, there's nothing new on baloney. There's plenty new.
Yeah, right.
There's plenty new. Maybe you haven't thought of it, but there are some things that are new. You know, we're not all just redoing the wheel.
Right.
Yeah. Some of us make our own wheels, but, you know.
True.
So I think that's important. You know, whether it's you are studying stuff that happened before, so you have a good background, or you're pushing forward in another direction because, you know, you're trying to see what's on the other side of that.
Well, you're talking about, you know, the wheel. I mean, you got a few new wheels.
Yeah.
Things that you're involved with, things you're passionate about. Mm-hmm. Why don't we talk about that? I mean, I know, you know, listen, you've worked with Elkhart, you've done brass tacks, you do training minutes for FDIC, right? The UL fires study for the attack study, the coordinated fire attack study, water mapping. These are things that you are directly involved with.
Yes.
You have a brand new prop that you've been messing with, right?
Yes.
Your hallway and small room prop, right?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit? Like,
sure.
Where's that passion and what fires you up to, like, really dive in? Because this is hard stuff. This isn't like, you know, you're really diving in and dissecting each little segment, right, of the push.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the UL study.
Yeah.
So the fire attack study, they had a couple of components in there, which one was water mapping and the other was air entrainment. Then we had basically the study. So those offshoots there that they wanted to know about have become very important components in reality to fire attack. So something that seemed, you know, off to the side, like the vegetables, and this is the meat and potatoes.
Right.
I mean, there was plenty of meat and potatoes, but there's other stuff is sort of foundational, you know, to everything else. So it's been interesting that we've been able to, with the development of the hose prop, is to flow and show, basically. But it's funny because I could go back to maybe 2007. I don't even know. The pictures, I was out in like Sacramento somewhere, and I have a hallway that I had them build for me, up against the wall.
Right.
And I'm like, this didn't start with UL. That much I do know.
Right, sure,
So I was trying to do nozzle techniques, and sweeping the floor or at a conference,
right.
and come up with this idea or that idea, and they have been able to do something similar, but with numbers.
Got it.
So you're getting they're capturing the data that we didn't ever really capture.
Right.
So a lot of the components were there, they just weren't recognized or they weren't put together. But I will say, like, some of the things that I fought for in the first fire attack study, which was I wanted a long hallway and I wanted the flow and move technique put in there. And I got pushed back a little bit, but you know what? They kind of saw the relevance of the hallway and they built it that way. And then the flow and move turned out to be the shit. And, now everybody's talking about making a push down the hallway. And I'm like, awesome, but this is nothing new.
Right.
Like you said, the FDNY, this is nothing new for the FDNY. This was the way we did it.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that we had some science behind that.
Sure.
And Steve Kerber, who was the head of the project, was able to agree, and so I got both things that I wanted, and it turned out those two things are pivotal in a lot of this stuff, and it's also pivotal in the education of firefighters, whether it be, here or somewhere else. These components can be either built or, facsimile can be made.
Right.
And just recently, I was down in Phoenix area, and they had built a hose prop. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a hallway of about 20 feet long, and then probably like a 10 by 12 room, and it's mostly plexiglass so that you can see where the hose stream is going and what it's doing. So even myself, just recently I was watching somebody do it, and I thought of something while they were doing it. That's kind of, you're asking me about like my contemporaries that I respect and have a lot of respect for. They all have the same secret ingredient that they can see something and go, all right, hold on. Maybe if I did this with this, those two pair together.
Right.
Okay, good. So I think that's the key, because look, you could teach anybody to give a class. They could just regurgitate all the numbers and all that stuff. But that's it. If that's all you're bringing to the table, that's not enough.
Right.
So,
but you're still learning.
You're still learning.
Just what you said. I mean, you sat there, looked at the prop, and went, "Oh, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
I saw something new." Right.
Mm-hmm. With all this stuff that when you look into all the details on the nozzle, like what are and this is random, but like what are the mistakes that you see firefighters making on the nozzle?
Well, there's two things. First is I see the mistakes and I try and correct them, but often this is habitual.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing. This is not just a one-off.
Sure.
This is how this person operates the line. So it's a matter of we really need to teach them how to do it the right way first. Mm-hmm. That is the big thing. I had this whole thing in my class years ago with I had a picture of one of my firefighters, the poor guy. Everybody thought he didn't know what he was doing. It was all staged, It's like people are like, "Oh, he shouldn't hold it like that." I'm like, "It's a staged photograph."
Right.
But you'd see firefighters, holding the line like super close to their body, like back, here. Yeah. You don't have any rotation on this nozzle from here, and you're just about basically losing it. It's going behind you. So you'd see that. Different hand holds. I mean, I don't believe in holding on to the pistol grip. I like the Ron Popeil method. Set it and forget it.
Yeah.
So a lot of it has to do with how they hold the line and different things like that. So some people have to compensate. Some people just do fantastic anyway. But as you guys know, the pairing of hose and nozzles is very important.
Yeah.
And the fire services has kind of figured that out.
Starting to get there.
Starting to get there, correct. Starting to get there. So we know what the flows are, what we're looking for.
Yeah.
How do we match them up, this one with that one? So, and then how is the nozzle made? All of that stuff. How is the hose made?
Right.
So there's been great advancements in both, obviously. And once it's correct, the system is built, it'll function. It'll function highly for you. So in New York, we were doing the stamp pipe, and we were doing 3 lengths of 2.5 at one time. And then they switched to what I would call a blended line, 2 pieces of 2.5, 1 piece of 2-inch. And we use this Mercedes XL.
Right.
So they found out that 2-inch lead length is going to get us into the fire department faster, advance better. Why not? Why not use that? A little bit lower flow, but still over 200, plenty. And that's what we do. And we're getting better results because of that. So a lot of places look at hose and nozzle evaluations. They really have to be done together to get the pairing kind of correct, you know? And
we harp on that all the time.
But once you do, and you have this system for yourself, you put the time in, it should work.
Yeah.
It should work for you. And nobody's selling you anything. You're selling yourself,
I think part of the issue too is, there's an intimidation factor, believe it or not, I think, stretching lines and flowing water, because most fire departments don't do it every day. Think about it.
Yeah, no,
right?
I know.
That's the real conversation is the majority of the country is not stretching lines every day and going to fires every day, or even stretching for training.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And so they becomes, once you deprioritize the stretch, right? It becomes one of those things that people start to put as a secondary function of the engine and not the primary function, because we're doing more service calls, more this, more that,
Sure.
and it becomes more secondary. And then that's where you kind of develop this, lack of knowledge and understanding, because you don't have your hands on it every day. We got to get away from that. We got to get back to the primary function of stretching hose. Whether you're going to a fire or not every single day, you got to have a well put together engine company, whether it's 2 guys or 4 guys or 6 guys.
I also thought one of the things that I picked up when you were talking with Corley more, the importance of making sure, especially if you're using a smoothbore, to have a pitot on the end and make sure you're getting that accurate reading when you're doing that training. So we talked about the training just for the nozzle firefighter and getting that straightened out, but the pump operator, like, they need to know that they're actually hitting that target pump discharge pressure and that it's matching up at the
Right. I think most, especially departments that run a set pre-connect, have a pretty good idea what their pump do. Not everyone, though, obviously, because you might have a variation in nozzles as well on the rig. But you're right. But in training, what Rob is referring to is when I would have a company come out, an in-service company come out, I'd pitot the line, because I wanted for that engine to flow basically the same as tomorrow's engine.
Right.
And I couldn't always tell what was going on outside, so this is what we did. We made sure they were at 50, shut it down, now we're good to go. So that meant that each firefighter that got the nozzle got the same nozzle the other one did. Because, you don't want a company to be like, wow, they're not so great. Meanwhile, their nozzle was 15 pounds over what it should have been.
Right.
So that's a problem. So for equity and, actually being able to judge them fairly, you have to check the accuracy of the stream. You have to know what you're putting out. Yeah. So I would do that as an extra thing because, I knew how to do it, and it made it right in my head. That's how it had to be. So that worked out well.
Good. Let's talk about, let's pivot a little bit, right? So we're talking about a lot of training.
Right.
Your involvement with the UL and your involvement with a bunch of, the conferences and so on.
Yeah.
Training today versus training of yesterday, right? I know we talked about 1403 a little bit. I know you wanted to hop on that a little bit.
Yeah, we can get on that.
Give your 2 cents, because I think it's important to have realistic conversations, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we got to confront issues and we got to talk about things head on.
Right. So training versus training years ago, one of the things that engine officers have to get past is that wetting their hose while they're working. You can stretch a line and wet it, because the people that don't want to drill always push. yeah, but if we wet the line and we get a call,
Oh,
we're
jeez.
going to have to drain the line. And what are we doing with the line? Are we leaving it here? What are we doing? And that's going to delay us. And they're very concerned about that next run. But they're not very concerned about...
That might come in, right?
Yeah, they're not worried about stretching the hose. So,
Right.
so you have to get past that. So there's a couple ways. One is you just barrel through it, or, maybe you bring some extra hose with you. So that if you do get a call,
Right.
you just break it and leave it. Most
Sure.
people are not going to touch the fire
That's
hose.
right.
They're not going to drain it out and go, what's this
look what I
worth?
got. Yeah.
It's not really worth anything to
Right.
me. So I had, years ago, because we have our beds are about 7 feet long. I built a plywood drop-in at the top that hooked on the sides of the dividers. So I could put however many lengths, 4 or 5 lengths up there, and we could stretch from that, and I didn't bother the primary bed. So I had that for a while on the rig. They knew I meant business when I put that thing on there.
Yeah, boy. It's going to be a long afternoon.
But that's another thing too. Sometimes officers overdo drills.
Sure.
You want to get a point across. Keep the point kind of small. You don't need to grab everything in a day. Work on something small, get it done. Maybe get some reps in on that. That's the big thing, is the reps, because as we see here, when you're doing a class, the more reps you can get, the better usually.
sure.
So, the reps are important. And then getting back to the other thing, the 1403. So NFPA 1403 is the standard you follow if you're going to do an acquired structural burn. In other words, somebody donates a house, and the fire department gets it, and they were going to do some fire attacks in there. And basically, some of that has gotten a little far afield. It basically is an engine. This is an engine thing for engine firefighters, and it's about extinguishment. That's
Right.
really, there are other things you can get out of it, of course, coordinated ventilation, things like that, and some searches in actual smoke
right.
conditions. So there are other things you can get, but the primary is fire attack and extinguishment. So NFPA has their standard on how it should be run, and it works pretty good. The NFPA standard, though, was built on some serious injuries and tragedies and deaths, and the standard, had to make a turn towards that, and it did. And what happened was we have excluded real furniture from the burn process. Right. So what I want to do is add a new chapter to 1403, and under certain circumstances, in other words, the model was that we would build a model home. Now, it's not going to be a home per se.
Right.
It's going to be a built environment that replicates certain engine functions that are valuable to the engine firefighters trying to put out today's fires.
Right.
So that's the idea behind it, a fully dedicated, reusable model, a curriculum-based experience, and certified instructor cadre under the auspices of a fire academy.
Yeah.
So this is super tight.
Oh yeah, this
super tight.
This isn't out in the rolling hills of Kansas where
we're not rolling any tires into the burn room.
Exactly.
That's not going to
I
happen.
got some,
But
got some foam
but
mattresses.
as of now, we can't do that.
as of now, we can't do
We're held
anything.
back, right.
So my point is already proven, because just look at the UL burns. So we had 25 UL burns in their lab. So we had the house that was basically like this house,
Right.
studs and sheetrock. That's all it was. There's no roof, no basement, none of that. No asbestos abatement, none of those worries. So whatever the hoops are to jump through, that's fine. But I still think by doing this and keeping it tight, we will be able to give a experience to a guy in Connecticut and the same experience to the guy in California, and both of those will help them battle fires tomorrow.
So I just scribbled down, because I don't know how long you're going to go with that, but
Yeah.
consistency.
Right.
It goes back to what you were talking about before, training at the in-service training with your companies, and getting it to 50,
Sure.
every time. Consistency matters, reps matter, but consistent reps.
So in the live burn experience, let's say you have a Cape Cod house you got. All right, so maybe the rooms are a little smaller there. The distances, the travel distances aren't much. So that experience, while it's fire attack and still decent using the current burn material list, it's not functionally what are you learning.
Right.
So I want to increase the functionality of what we're learning, not just putting out fires. And I believe that by following a tight regime, we can use real furnishings like UL did in all of their experiments, and they went in and put the fires out. So I think we can do the same thing. The other concern is, of course, people are worried about contamination. And I'm not sure. I think your contamination level is probably lower with doing a fire attack that lasts maybe a minute and a half, and then fogging out the room, hydraulically getting rid of all the smoke,
right,
versus sitting in a flashover container till your bottle runs. I don't know. I could be wrong,
it's a
but
very good point.
I don't know.
That's a very good point.
But we'll make showers available, and we'll clean the gear, and
Sure.
That's fine. That's fine.
Sure.
It's not a problem.
It's really about that experience. And
Yeah.
that's what they're missing.
I think so. I think and they can change that. And I'm hoping to get enough of them on board that we will do it. I already have the fire department that's interested in doing it. So I will have an experiment before the end of the year.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, much success with that, because I think that would be a big turn for the abilities of getting more realistic training out there for.
We have to
consistent
break
training.
this cycle of being afraid of a couch.
I agree.
Come on.
I agree. I agree. Well, listen, fear is the firefighter's enemy. You said that in one of your speeches.
That's correct.
Right?
I said
and
that.
we overcompensate for everything these days, right? One thing goes wrong, we overcompensate, and then to bring it back around is near impossible.
That's correct, yes.
But it takes guys like you that are willing to put their foot, stand up and say, hey, maybe we went a little too far. Let's bring it back a little bit.
That's all I'm asking for.
We need more of that.
For just a little consideration, and I'm not upset with the way they do anything.
Of course.
They're great, but I think we need to add another chapter to it, and that's what we're going to investigate. So
hope it's explored further. So
yeah.
That's great. Ray, we got a few minutes left, so I just want to throw one at you. For a younger guy in a firehouse that doesn't have the best culture, struggling, small department, doesn't have a lot of chance to bounce around. I know you're very strong in leadership. I know that you endorse your people, and you respect people that work hard for you as a boss, but also you work harder for them. That's what a true boss does, right? So at the end of the day, some advice to those younger guys right now that are like, hey man, I'm a couple years in and I'm getting disgruntled, or it's just it's not the job I wanted it to be and I'm not enjoying it. What can they do?
Well, that would run the gamut from put up the good fight to look somewhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, some things are just, the culture is just so bad that you're not going to change.
I agree.
You're not going to. The culture is very strong, and if you're looking to break through it, that's going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
But I do get letters from or emails from firefighters with that dilemma, like, hey, I'm here, and the boss doesn't ever want to drill, and there's all these things going on, and it's really disheartening. It really is. It's terrible that firefighters have to have. They have all this energy, they want to learn, and there's no support system. So that can put a firefighter down the wrong path for a long time, or just not be happy. When you go into a firehouse, you should be happy. It should be your happy place.
I agree with you.
Not your dreaded place.
Right.
It should be good, and I would, for a lot of these firefighters, always take baby steps to see if you can get some changes.
Takes time.
Maybe it's a matter of you just need to be in a different place or a different shift or or a completely different new position, career somewhere. And you might as well, if you're not going to be happy, make the change that will make you happy.
Talk about the conferences. You're very involved. Go ahead. You're very involved. No, you're fine. You're very involved in conferences, tons of different conferences all over, right? You speak, you do hot training, you do hands-on and so on. No problem.
Yeah.
That's another avenue for these kids. Tell them to get involved, right?
Oh, yeah.
Seek it out. Get out there.
100%. I totally believe, like, the NFPA committees is a good place, UL, or just get involved, period.
Yeah.
Have an interest. have an interest in whatever it is that interests you, and explore it, write about it, and it opens doors for you.
Yeah, good. You have the water?
Excuse me, I do. But
Okay, good. Just want to make sure.
got a little coughing jag going on.
No,
here.
you're good.
I got cough drops too.
So live from the show, what do you got for what's next for Ray McCormack? Other than that 1403.
Oh, gosh.
What's next for you?
Yeah.
A bunch of travel next month,
Okay.
and then
You still enjoy it?
I do. Yeah, I enjoy it. And then doing some local training the following month, and then I'm off for the all summer.
Okay.
So then we'll revisit some stuff in the fall.
What's your downtime? What do you do in your downtime?
Oh, I go to the beach.
Do you?
Yeah.
That's me, man.
Yeah.
I'm a beach bum too, for sure. Well, good for you. Well,
Thanks.
enjoy the summer, enjoy the beach.
Thank you.
Because I know how hard you guys do work, and I will say that it's been an absolute privilege to become friends and to get
thank
to
you. I
know
appreciate
you.
it.
And for you to be here today with us and share the message, I appreciate that. And I just know how busy you are, but I think that what you do and what you have been doing for the fire service is important, and we value that. So from an outsider looking in, thank you for everything that you've
Well,
done.
thanks. I appreciate being asked on here. It's,
Yeah, of course.
It's a busy time at FDIC, but I'm happy
That's right.
to be here. As people at Mercedes booth are very nice, and hanging out with you guys is good too.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you very
All right,
much, Ray, for
thanks,
joining
bud.
us today.
All right, thanks.
Guys, thank you for tuning in today from Mercedes Textiles booth 4950 and 51. Lieutenant Ray McCormack retired out of the FDNY. An absolute honor to have you here today with us.
Thanks.
The Mercedes Textiles family has been incredible. They've given us a home for the next day and a half here to share and spread the good word. Ray, you were part of that today. Just sharing the word. Get out there and tell people that the fire service is good, because that's really what the message is all about. So we'll be back tomorrow live at 11 a.m. and again at 3 p.m. tomorrow live from the Mercedes booth. If you're at FDIC, join us. Come in. We're going to have an open mic. A lot of different guests from the industry will be coming in.
Oh, man.
And we're going to be sharing a good word. And if you're tuning in live and watching the live stream, thank you very much for tuning in and giving us some time today. Ray, thanks for sharing your message. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Rob, thanks, pal. As always, man.
Yeah, man.
It's been a hell of a day.
Yes.
Good. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for everybody being here. Have a great day. We'll be back. I'm Jeremy with National Fire Radio. Have a good day.